So the first person up looks like will be Jay Wills. And again, remind you to be sure and send any information in to our website. We'd love to have these comments on paper and where we can take them to our rule makers. Go ahead.
How you doing tonight?
Good.
My name is Jay Wills. I'm from Maryland, Missouri. I've been in the cannabis industry now for 9 years between 4 different states. And I've been going over everything that you guys have been putting out. And one of the things I'm concerned about is testing and the amount of labs that we have in the state. And I know with 61 or 60 cultivations and X amount of processing and manufacturing, that 2 labs will no way be able to test any of the product in a reliable time. And I believe that if you are a cultivator or a manufacturer, you need to have a representative from the lab come and acquire your samples, because anybody can pick the best out of the best and send it in and get the best results. And what I've seen in a lot of these states is inconsistent testing. And that comes from harvest batch size and things like that. So I think Colorado is 100 pounds, California is 50 pounds, Oregon is 15 pounds. Every 15 pounds harvested has to have a pesticide, pest, and mold testing. And from what I've seen in all these states, as I see product that gets to the shelf, that is disgusting, full of powdery mildew. You can see bugs on it. And if that's passing, that means that they're not doing a good enough job. So my recommendation to the state is we need more than 2 labs to test all this product. It's not going to happen. You'll have stuff sitting on the shelf for months and months and months, and you won't be able to sell it. So my 2 cents is we need more labs, and we need good testing, because the patients in Missouri deserve clean, quality cannabis. And that's really all I got to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Good comment. We will certainly take that back, and we certainly the 2 that are spelled out in the amendment are the minimums that were put in there by the drafters. So we certainly will offer and entertain allowing more than just the 2 on the testing side, for sure. Okay, our next speaker will be Kristen, is that Bengtson? Did I get it right? Close? Okay.
Hi, I'm Kristen Bengtson, so pretty close. I'm a resident of Creve Coeur, Missouri. What I'd like to bring up today is just making sure that we are protecting some of the vulnerable people in our state when it comes to starting up our medical marijuana program. So I'm specifically referring to the youth in our communities that will just have greater access to medical marijuana, or to marijuana, through greater access for the patients that do want it. Specifically, I'd like to talk about or recommend having dispensary staff training. I work in the field of prevention, and we see this with alcohol sales, we see this with pharmacies even, and tobacco sales. Without adequate training of staff members, who are supposed to be providing medical advice to patients, we really don't have a good gauge on what the industry would. There's no good industry standard then. Somebody might not get the same care at another place, at another dispensary. So I'd really like to see dispensary staff trainings recommended, if not required, as well as disclaimers and some sort of limits on disclaimers on the product and limits on edibles. I know it says in the amendment that we can have edibles, of course, but some sort of packaging limitations or warnings, just to make sure it's very clear to anybody who's looking at it that this is not something that is intended for a young person or eaten as candy. This is a medicine that is for somebody who needs it for a medical reason. So that's something I would like to recommend to the state. So that's pretty much it.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. we'll definitely take that back for sure, and we are looking at those issues. Louis Moynihan.
What's going on?
Hi, Louis.
Hey, how you doing? If I can get this microphone, you guys all hear me? Let's give it some very loud. Oh, you guys are awesome. Definitely that microphone. Maybe stand back. Killing it. Great job. I'm short and sweet as always. I don't know. I think everyone in this room should have the same opportunity to be treated and part of the business side of the industry. I don't think anybody, any union, any organization should have to charge people to help them. I don't think that it's wrong. And it's wrong to say, I'm going to help you, charge you to help you to be part of this business. It's unfair. I know there's consultants, I know there's everybody, that's the racket. I am Missouri and I understand the economic impact it's going to have on the state. I love it. I'm also a St. Louisan. We're brand loyal. We know we like to support the little guys. We always have, and we always will. And I just hope that when the dust settles after this, that DHSS was on the right side of history. And I know you're going to be with a smile right there. So that's all I'll leave it at that, guys. Take it easy.
Thank you, Louis. Aaron Padola? Pandola. Oh, it's an N. I'm sorry. Sorry about that, Aaron.
Hi, I'm Aaron Pandola from Amendment 2 Consultants. And from my experience dealing with competitive government awards across healthcare and the biomedical life sciences community, I find that there's no competition cycle where it's not strengthened, where you can have a PDF submission of the application where you can use tables and graphics and design, submit appendices as well outside of scored sections to support that narrative content. But basically, if you have just black and white texts, on and on and on, it's like reading a newspaper, and then after 1,000 of those, you sort of lose the reality of the proposal. So please, I please encourage you to allow for graphics and tables.
On the application process?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Would you be sure, all of you, send this in to us on our website if you can. I'm trying to take notes, but I won't get all that information down just like you requested, and the real makers would sure appreciate that. So good comments. Okay. We've got Joe Ingrande. I'm sorry, I know I butchered that one.
No, you got a bet on, brother.
I did?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Thank you.
Very good.
I'm a combat disabled veteran, and I just wanted to make sure that, I think in keeping with the spirit of this, that we would have some sort of extra points awarded to our application as such. While it's a protected, not necessarily a protected class, it is something that represents the spirit of this amendment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. And that's a good time for me to mention too, in case all of you didn't know, the funding from this, the surplus funds after all the bills are paid, do go to the veterans in Missouri. So we're sure proud of that.
Thank you.
How about Justin Harmon?
Hi, thank you. My name is Justin Harmon. I'm a citizen of Webster Groves. I represent a lot of municipalities in the area, and from their perspective, my suggestion is simply for the state to provide as much detailed guidance for municipalities and local government as possible. These entities want to comply with the law. They want to allow these businesses to operate in their jurisdiction, but they need direct guidance from the state. And some examples of that, I know that there is in existence a minimum 1,000 foot spacing requirement for schools, daycares, churches, but there's no direction as of yet as to how that will be measured. And it makes a big difference whether it's measured door to door versus property line to property line. That's one example. Another example is there's discussion about someone with the right to possess medical marijuana being able to possess a 60-day supply with no real direction on what a day's supply means. You know what I mean? So some further guidance on that, and as well as with dispensaries, I'm sure this is envisioned in your process, but with these businesses located in the communities, local government is going to want to make sure that they're safe and that they're secure, as are the business owners and their residents. But it's hard for our clients or our municipalities to create rules and regulations not knowing yet what the state's rules will be, because we can't be, more restrictive than that. We don't want to be.
Sure.
So just a general, more direct guidance that local government can receive about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, our plan again is to have the rough draft of the rules out there well before the final, and encourage everyone to review those so we can make amendments to that. The next one we have is it Wally of Musa? Yeah. All right.
Good evening. My name is Wale Musa. I'm a long-term resident of the city of St. Louis. I'm also a chemist by training and a policies and procedures consultant by choice. That's what my company does. We have here a new opportunity in the state of Missouri, especially the beginning of a new kind of business sector in the state of Missouri. And what I want to speak to you today, since this is a listening trip, is for you to take into consideration that we live in a state that over 100 and almost 200 years now, since 1821, has marginalized African Americans in this state. I can spend the next 3 hours talking about the history of disparate impact on African Americans in this state. So when we have a new sector coming into the state, I want you to be very conscious of the fact that a lot of businesses are going to run from outside of Missouri to try and take a lion's share of what is happening here. And if we're not careful in that process, a lot of people who have been left behind before, in terms of their businesses and enterprises, are going to be continuously, adversely impacted. So Missouri must make a conscious effort to reduce any kind of disparate impact on those who have been historically adversely impacted in this state as you open up a new business, multi-million-dollar business sector in the Missouri economy. What am I talking about? There must be fairness to Missourians in your rulemaking process. Missourians cannot be relegated to just an appendage of multi-billion-dollar enterprises that are flying in from California, Colorado, whatever it is that they're coming from. What am I talking? I'm talking about you need to pay attention to including in your rules, because we're not talking about policies and procedures. And when you establish your policies and procedures, you do have the ability to tell them and some discretion to make sure that they meet the urgent and important needs of the residents and the taxpayers of the state of Missouri. More specifically, there needs to be a serious attention paid to what I call African American participation and consideration, so African Americans do not start a third century in this state marginalized. Missouri used to be a slave breeding state where black men and women were breeded, where black children were bred in this state for the slave market. We don't need to go into another century or begin to make rules and policies that do not reflect the history of disparate treatment. I'm going to close it on this note. There needs to be more than 51% Missouri ownership in any deal. Remember, I said Missouri ownership. There also needs to be a point system whereby the higher the Missouri content is, in that ownership of any business, the more points are awarded to those Missouri companies in order to give them a competitive edge against big money and billionaires that are trying to capture the Missouri market. Finally, the concept of Missouri content is very, very important, but also is a concept of monitoring and compliance so that very vulnerable people in these communities do not become a secondary market for marijuana. It's very, very important. If there is any need for additional comments, I only have 5 minutes, but as a consultant, as a policy and procedure specialist, and as a historian on what has happened to African Americans in this state, I urge you, I beckon you to make sure you put into your policy rulemaking process some kind of a point system to make sure that Missouri residents, black, white, veteran, are not disadvantaged. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And again, Wally, I'm sure encourage you, if you could, to send those to us on our website or jot those points down for me and I'll take them back if you can. Appreciate that. I think that's all of the forms that I had. Is there anyone else? We'll open it up now. If there's anyone else that'd like to speak and didn't fill out a form, we'll allow you to come on up and speak, and then we'll get your name down and information. Yes, sir. Come on up. You got one? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like testifying before the committee. Didn't know if I was going to or not.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Thank you. My name is Dick Haynes. I want to echo what the gentleman had to say about the municipalities. We've met with numerous municipalities right now that have no idea what they're going to do with their ordinances. And it's very important for the businesses that want to get started that if you could put the rules out for the municipalities sooner than later so they can get those ordinances passed, because some of them are saying, well, we don't know whether we can get it done, by the time they award the application. Well, you got a big expense if you're going to buy land or if you're going to get dispensary locations. So the sooner the better that you can help those municipalities with their ordinances. That will help everybody else that wants to get in to the business and know which municipality to go to. And as far as the 1,000 rule, 1,000 foot, probably be better what I've learned down in Florida, and I played whack-a-mole down there, is probably front door to front door instead of property line to property line, because finding dispensary locations, they have to be owned by the landlord, if you're going to lease it, because financial institutions will not let them lease if they have a mortgage. So they're taking them from property line, and you might have half an acre of parking lot. And then it messes with the distance. And if municipalities have a distance separation requirement other than the 1,000 feet, then that's where it comes in. So if it could be spelled out, that would be better. And that's all I got. Appreciate the time you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we will get those 1,000 foot numbers. We will definitely get that defined. I might mention on Amendment 2, it's pretty clear in the amendment that they did not want us to put any more restrictions on the cities and the counties. And so what's in Amendment 2 is probably going to include a lot of what will be there. So I know many cities need clarification on some things, but it's not our intent to regulate the cities. That's why we have cities and counties. So that should make it easier for them to be able to do that. The one thing they can do, and it's clear in the amendment, that they can loosen that 1,000-foot regulation. So that's actually the maximum, I guess you might say, that was put in by the drafters, not by us. And the city, and it's clear that it says that the cities and the counties can loosen that and make them allow it to be closer if they so desire. So that might clarify a little bit. I'm sure we'll have some things, but all in all, we're leaving that up to them pretty much. Yes, sir.
How you guys doing?
Really good. Here's a form. And
Yeah,
I'll share it. Okay, great.
Mike Wilson and-
Yeah, go ahead.
From Gerald, Missouri.
Yeah, get to the mic there.
Farther out here.
Yeah.
Everybody seems kind of touching on the business aspect of it. I'd like to speak a little bit to maybe some of the draft rules that you guys have just released for patient and individual cultivator and so forth. Some of the rules are for denial of application. It has a lot to do with timelines. I think you guys give 10 days from, and I think in your words, from the time that you send out notice that somebody has to correct a deficiency in the application and get it back to you. And my thought is if you're mailing something, it's 3 days out, 2 or 3 days out, 2 or 3 days back in. That only gives them a few days to address the problem. And then this, if it doesn't come back to you in 10 days, that is reason for you guys to issue a denial. And then farther down in your rules, you say if there's 2 denials, somebody can be banned for 2 years from using it. It seems like you guys might be using clerical errors, different avenues maybe to keep. Why not give them 30 days? It seemed like a little bit more time would be helpful. The other issue I have, and it's with your revocation on individual cultivation, it seems to me that you guys might be administratively denying people their Fourth Amendment right. There's a part in there that says, at your convenience or whatever you deem fit, that any cultivator has to allow them to come into, and I'm going to use the word home, because a lot of people will be cultivating in their home. But it seems to me that you guys have permission at that point, anytime you guys seem fit, to come into somebody's house to inspect the cultivation. And it just seems like it's a runaround, an administrative runaround of the Fourth Amendment. That's my 2 cents.
If you would grab on these forms, and you got okay, and be sure to jot those points on the form, here's your mine on the back, and we'll take those back to the real makers. Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak? Yes, sir. Sure, and grab a form before you leave.
Yes, sir. Just 2 quick points that I have not seen addressed anywhere, and they might have been. I just have not seen it. One would be on that individual cultivation, especially here in the St. Louis metro area and in Kansas City. We have a lot of renters, and I'm not seeing any clear designation on how or if renters can grow within their apartments or condos or whatnot, as well as what provisions landlords will have to address renters who may want to grow that can lead to fungus and can lead to other things that would be deleterious to the property. The second point that I have is I was looking up at the dispensary numbers and noticing that there are some massive congressional districts that only have 18 applicants for various dispensaries or whatnot. Under those minimal provisions, I think that these scoring should have a minimum score to be approved. So let's say when I had like 24 that you had to approve per congressional district. That means if you get 20 applications, does that mean all 20 of those are automatically approved? I think that there should be some minimal score. That way, if you get a complete but very bad application, you could still hold that slot open. But if they don't meet criteria beyond explicitly what is lined out in Amendment 2, I think it would be better to wait for a good application that is focused on public health as opposed to permitting a poor application that is really just somebody who's trying to make a buck.
Might also mention, that'd be a good time to mention that the pre-application forms and fees that are filed with us at this point, that we had released the information as far as their location by congressional district. Those are tentative locations. They can be changed upon the formal application process, so those aren't set in stone. And I want to mention that in case anybody might think that they are, because they aren't. They can be changed by the applicant when the official application comes out. So, okay, anyone else? And again, be sure, those of you that have spoke, be sure that you get us a form, and if you can jot those comments you made, just a brief summary on the back of the form, that'd be awesome if you would do that. Or go back and enter them on our website. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's important to us. Anyone else? We really appreciate the community colleges, San Luis Community College here for offering their facility. Appreciate the officers that are here tonight, all the staff that's helped us. It's been great. It really helps us to be able to have a place to be able to do this. And so I think we should give a round of applause to the college and all their staff. I was hoping Dr. Williams would make it. I know he was delayed getting out of Jeff City. He thought he would be here by 5:30 or 5:45, but so we can hang around a few more minutes. I'd love for him to speak to you for a second, but if anyone else would like to speak, we certainly have the time and we're here. So yes, go ahead.
My name's Travis Lee from Springfield, Missouri. I just was wondering, really, is there any way to know if your pre-application was received? Do we get a follow-up email or?
No, but you can call the office.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Call the office. That would be the only exception to call Cheryl. And you mentioned Springfield, Travis. We're going to have one of these, as you know, a week from tonight in Springfield and a week from last night in Kansas City. So tell your friends and neighbors in those areas. Yeah. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Spencer Combs. I'm a local government attorney here in St. Louis. And I just wanted to reiterate a comment that was made earlier about prioritizing the local government rules. At this time, as you know, St. Louis has a slew of municipalities, probably more than anywhere I've heard in the country. So, in terms of helping them prepare their rules and regulations for regulating cannabis businesses, it would be supremely helpful if those were put out as soon as possible, because some municipalities have different priorities as to how they're going to regulate things, and so it'll help me, especially when I'm helping to write the rules, to just know what the state is going to allow, how much leeway the state is going to allow them in terms of regulation. So just hopefully put that as the priority for rules and releases in going forward. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Be sure and grab a form if you would.
Oh.
Thank you. Okay. The gentleman from Springfield, if you want to send that request to our email address, they can email you back too. It might save a phone call. If you want to do that, they'll be able to do that for you. Okay, sir. Jeff?
Yes, sir. Can
All
you
right.
hear me fine?
You bet.
Jeff Arnwine. I'm from Sedalia, Missouri. We represent Rival Cannabis. I have a few issues I'd like to address. One in regards to, I know it's a minimum of 2 labs on testing. We would like to suggest on behalf of our company a recommendation on the larger cultivation facilities that we work in partnership with the state to put labs inside and with a shared expense perhaps, once things get going, to help process at a quicker rate any of the product that's going out. Second of all, we would also like to see that it's a determined tax on our product that we can establish throughout the state of who we provide to and know how to keep records and subsequently get back to the cities that they're very interested in taking the money for. We are completely unclear of how all that is going to work, but we'd like to suggest that some type of a set fee or a set tax is put on us, so we know from throughout the state of Missouri what we're dealing with. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I might mention to you on the dispensary, the regular Missouri sales tax and the local sales taxes will be applicable just like they are on any other product. And then in addition to that, the 4% tax that was passed by the voters with this amendment, the proceeds after expenses are paid will go to the veterans. So those are the only taxes that will be assessed on the industry as far as I know. So does that answer your question on that? Or?
No, on the cultivation side, as far as the sale to the dispensaries, how is that going to be addressed? I mean,
Well, I don't believe there would be any tax on that. That would be a wholesale product. So
treated as an ag product?
yeah, just like a wholesale product.
Regular taxes are coming to revenue.
Yeah, you'd still have your profitability, the tax on your income and what have you at the end of the year with IRS and the state tax situation. I see we have a guest. We've been waiting on you. Dr. Williams, Director of Missouri Health. Here you go.
Again, just incredibly appreciate your coming out. I was a doctor for 30 years and believe fervently that the best way to help people as a doctor is to walk in the room and say, how can I help you? Listen. And so we're very much applying that principle here. We are the 33rd state to do this in the United States, and I love to quote Lindell and his team, which is that we want to do this the right way for Missouri, learning from other people who've done it before us, but also learning from Missourians what would work for them. It's very important to understand that our North Star, what we keep our eyes on, just like a doctor should always keep his eye on patients, is getting medical marijuana in the hands of patients who doctors think need it. So you may have lots of questions about cultivation and dispensaries and taxes and all that, but our North Star, like any medical program should be, is getting the medical marijuana in the hands of patients who need it. And all those other things are just issues that we have to solve or work through to get to that. Does that make sense? So that's where we're headed. And so far, I cannot thank Lindell enough. We have met all our deliverables. We are on track to meet all our deliverables. And that in a perfect world, we will be able to do this by the winter of next year, which will put us way ahead of anybody else who's ever tried. And you notice I said in a perfect world. It is not a perfect world. And so we know from other states that often it's not a perfect world, and that may slow us down. But that won't be because of us. That'll be because of things that we probably can't control. So again, sorry I'm late. I had to stay in Jeff City to do some things that are happening there. But it is incredibly important to us to listen. We have found it incredibly helpful. Things that we had a policy here last Saturday, and had also questions about landlords. And that really hadn't occurred to us. That all sorts of issues around security and growing and all sorts of things around landlords that frankly I hadn't thought about. So we find these incredibly helpful, and I'd be shocked if Linville hasn't picked up things tonight that we haven't thought about that will help us get to our North Star. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Linville. If there are any questions I can answer, I'm happy to, but otherwise, just really appreciate you coming.
Thanks, Dr. Williams. Anybody else on any questions? Okay. Come on forward. Fill out a form, jot your concerns down, and state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Lana Crass. I have a question regarding dispensaries and a needs-based sort of category, because this obviously won't be covered by what we call, insurance or prescription for insurance. Does the state of Missouri have any plans to perhaps help the people that have been issued the certificate and the card from the state of Missouri for needs-based patients? Will there be some sort of help offered to maybe the dispensary or to the client who's approved with the card for the purchase of the items that they need?
I don't have answers for those, but we'll write those down. One thing that you have to be cognizant of is that the federal government still doesn't recognize marijuana as being legal. And so when you get into the Veterans Administration and funding issues, federal money that funds, say, Medicaid programs in Missouri and what have you, that's going to dictate some of what can and can't be done for the needs-based patients. But I don't have any specific answers, but I just want to mention that to you because of the federal funding.
Yes, I understand that, but I thought since it is now legal in Missouri, that maybe Missouri, with the overage of the money that's going to go to help the veterans, not saying that they don't deserve any of the money. I'm just saying that there are possibly other needs-based people that could use that little piece of the pie to help them get the medicine that they need, that they won't have available because they're not going to be able to pay for it.
We will certainly take your concern back and discuss that. And the Constitution is pretty clear that the funds are to go to the veterans, and that was part of the amendment. But again, we will take that information back and share it absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sir, you want to come back in?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sorry. It's good to the doctor.
I was there Saturday in St. Charles with you, sir, and I was wondering, a question that came up after Saturday in St. Charles there in my mind was the seed-to-sale tracking, that whole IT nightmare that you were starting to allude to a little bit there. How is that going to integrate with us as far as people who are looking to get into the business and stuff like that? Is it going to be an interactive? Or are we going to sign on? Or I just don't know what that looks like. I was just kind of curious if you guys have a plan in place.
Yeah, it's actually an easy question to answer because, again, remember we're the 33rd state to do this. It's been going on since 1996. So there are national vendors who do seed to sale, and they've had a lot of experience in doing it. So Linville has put together a phenomenal team, and they are in the process of developing that in warp speed so that that expertise can be brought to bear. So again, just remembering that we're not the first state, and so other states have done that in a very efficient way. And so we're not too concerned about that. We don't consider that a nightmare. That has been worked out over the last 25 years.
Those software systems are pretty elaborate, and as Dr. Williams said, they've been sophisticated over the years. Many retail businesses, have a point of sale system that is tied in. They even submit their taxes on it. Punch a button and send it into the Department of Revenue. So it will be a similar type system. I mean, that does it all, you might say. It's tied back to our department and everything else. So, yeah. Good question. We normally don't answer a lot of questions, but we do have a little time, so we can take a couple more here. Yeah, yes, sir.
Come up.
Yeah.
I already got it once. But speaking about the seed to sale, do you know what program the state's going to use? Are we going to use Metric or one of the other? So you guys are going to build a whole new seed to sale program?
No. Again, what we said, that there are national vendors to do that.
Right.
We haven't selected it yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I would recommend Metric.
Duly noted.
Not to buy a truck.
Duly noted.
We're working on the RFPs to send those out. We have obviously state rules and regulations to follow with all those purchases. So, and as Dr. Williams said, it's warp speed right now and that stuff. So, yes, sir.
Do you all have any plans as far as regulating on the disposal of non-commodities on the agriculture side, as far as being able to use it as a feed product? Are you all going to get into that side of it or stay out of that, or do you all have?
Yeah, we don't have any intention right now. We will have some regulations on the disposal of the stems and the non-commodities, as you call it, with the part that doesn't have any THC content or whatever, but we have not discussed any options as far as being able to utilize it for feed or anything like that. And of course, you know, the hemp industry and the CPL or CBD industry is regulated by the Department of Agriculture, so we don't get involved in that in the Department of Health. And they may have some options or solutions on that, but we,
that's what I was wondering. If
yeah.
Working with them in regards to that aspect of it on the cultivation side, because it crosses over your all's borders.
Yeah, I met with them, what's today? Linda, yesterday, Linda was in Poplar Bluff, so I met with Ag, I guess it was either yesterday, about hemp and CBD oil. And so, one thing Governor Parson asked us to do is to work better with each other than any cabinets have in the history of Missouri. And we actually do that. And that's where I was before I left here. I was with the Department of Social Services over an issue with women. And so I met with Ag because we do think there's overlap or some interface between hemp and medical marijuana, even though they're in two different departments. And so we do think there are opportunities there to learn from each other. And that's what that meeting was kind of about. But to your exact point, they're two very different things. And at this point, the Constitution is pretty prescriptive that waste has to be very, very carefully disposed of.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Andy DiCarlo. I'm from Chesterfield, Missouri. Our team is going to be applying for a dispensary license coming up in August. And considering a lot of themes that I've heard here that are kind of common, I think the zoning needs to be addressed very soon. Just like any startup or zoning, that small little piece is creating a huge obstacle to try to accomplish. Especially when you consider when the rules come out in June and then applications begin in August, it leaves just a tight 8 weeks to try to formulate all this. And even from a bakery to an auto repair shop, that's a tight line to try to develop anything. Especially if we think, as far as when these rules come out, all these different plans in this 8 weeks that has to be addressed, staffing plans, security plans, computer software. It's really tough to get all this stuff together when there's one little piece that holds us up. So it would be interesting to see if during the application process, depending on when the window closes on those applications, that some of these applicants, whether it be cultivation, infusion, or dispensary, are able to add an addendum as these things that develop. as the property maybe comes in and as the funding becomes available or other facets or plans are readily made. 8 weeks is tough to pull all this together when you're wanting to do it. And I think it'd be really great to keep a lot of this in Missouri. I'm a Missourian and my family's been in business here for many years, and I think this is a great opportunity, not just for the state, but for all the regular citizens and people like me and you and the others that are here. It's a super opportunity to get some entrepreneurship going and to start some new businesses and allowing mom and pop shops and people that have the right teams together an opportunity to form a cultivation dispensary instead of having to have hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this and pull it together. Banking needs to get on board. I know that's a federal issue, but that's a huge thing. I've seen it and discussed it before. I hope we don't wait till somebody gets hurt before we figure out how to handle the monies, whether it's coming from dispensaries or back and forth or whatever. I've been in a lot of places across the country. A lot of these folks are just handling cash. If they're successful businesses in one aspect, there's just a lot of cash moving, and that needs to be addressed. That's pretty much all I've got. I think this should really be kept for a lot of Missourians. Let's keep the big outside influences out. Let the regular guys and gals have the opportunity to do this, so it enhances the economy of Missouri and it provides more jobs and more influx into these communities that really want to do this. Thanks for having us. I know this is a big thing. You guys are like on tour like a rock band. Keep up the energy. Thanks.
One thing, thank you very much for your comments. This will be the closest I've ever been in a rock band, I can promise you. And that's a good thing. And as you know, I know you know this, but the tight timelines weren't written by us. Those were written in the Constitution. So the 8 weeks is written in the Constitution. We're trying to help people out that we should have the draft rules ready by mid-April. So it won't be June 4th that you'll see the first ever idea of what you need to do to apply. You should have about 3 to 4 months to get a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like on June 4th. So we're trying to do that to help you out. But yes, you bring up a great point. There are some incredibly tight timelines on this that we are required to meet according to the Constitution.
You said April. April, that's when maybe the first draft.
Yeah, April.
On this website?
Middle of April, hopefully we'll have the first draft. We just sent the first section of the first draft, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll be doing that as we get a section ready. It's got to be seen by a lot of people, as I'm sure you can understand. And even with that, we know there will be changes. That's why we're trying to get it out there so folks just like yourselves and others can review it and look at it and say, hey, wait a minute, this is something that ought to be looked at, as we had earlier by a couple of folks. So, I'll mention this again. I mentioned it earlier, but as far as the local authorities, I'm just going to try to find a section in the Constitution here where it read.
7.11.
What's that?
7.11.
Unless allowed by the local government, no new medical marijuana cultivation facility, testing facility, dispensary facility, or infused products manufacturing facility shall be initially sited within 1,000 feet of any then existing elementary or secondary school, child daycare center, or church. And no local government shall prohibit medical marijuana cultivation facilities, testing facilities, infused products facilities, or dispensary facilities or entities with a transportation certification, either expressly or through enactment of ordinances or regulations that make their operation unduly burdensome in the jurisdiction. However, local governments may enact ordinance or regulations not in conflict with this section or with regulations enacted pursuant to this section governing the time, place, and manner of operation of such facilities in the locality. A local government may establish civil penalties for violation of an ordinance or regulations governing the time, place, or manner of operation of these facilities, and I won't read the four again, but same ones, or a transportation certification. So we think it's very clear that we're not to elaborate on what the amendment says, and the local governments, it just said what they can do. So I don't know what they're really waiting on us for on that piece, because I don't think we have intentions of putting any more strict or stringent rules or regulations on the local governments other than what's in the amendment. Dr. Williams, you can clarify that if you like, but I don't know what it would be at this point. Other than clarifying the 1,000-foot rule, we realize we need to do that. We need to specify front door, park, property line or whatever.
Well, I would just say one of the wonderful things about having Lendl is he was a county commissioner. And so, I mean, one of the wonderful things about having him lead this program is he knows Missouri, he knows what it's like to be a county commissioner and zoning and all those type of issues. So that's been a real value add to our team. I'll just say parenthetically, you may have already talked about this, but we're thankful that we have 500,000 veterans in Missouri, we have 6 million people, and governors are veterans. And so one thing that we appreciate is that based on a robust, mature market, which is about 3% of the population based on the other 31 states, we hope or anticipate that we may be able to deliver to the Veterans Commission $20 to $30 million a year, which is greatly needed. And so we're thankful that that has been written into the Constitution.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Tom Rolfian. I'm from Kirkwood, Missouri. As I'm trying to explore this industry as well as I'm sure everybody else in this room, and as well as yourselves, you said we have a chance for some questions here. So the big question that my wife keeps on asking, why am I doing this and what are the big obstacles? And the two that keep coming up are, one is to echo this gentleman before me, the fiscal end, right, the banking end. And while I recognize that there are these federal regulations, if you do have a financial institution within the state, is the state working with internal state financial institutions to try to come up with some sort of solution to essentially put these companies on an equal playing field as normal markets, giving them access to be able to use credit and debit and things of those natures, so not solely a cash industry, and it's not quite as dangerous to have such an industry. And the second big question that I have is the state doing anything, again, the federal government here, right, has its rules, but is the state doing anything to possibly protect these industries and the people within them from any penalties that possibly could exist on the federal end? And then lastly, I guess, what is the best pipeline to communicate with you guys as we move forward and we keep having questions? That would be my 3 questions.
We can answer that last one.
Right there, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, our website is definitely the way. We've talked with the Federal Reserve, we've talked with the Missouri Bankers Association, we've talked with the Missouri Credit Union, and they all seem to be willing to listen and accept ideas and thoughts from other, how to do it in other states. There's some banks, from what we understand, that are considering helping the industry. Some don't want to touch it. And so I think it's going to be up to the individual banks as to how they do that. There was an act in 2014, the Rohrabacher, forget the last name. Rohrabacher-Farr Act. And I believe it basically stated that it was a federal act, that every year in the budget they would review it again, and I think every year since they have approved the fact, like they did in 2014, that the federal government wouldn't fund any law enforcement or any act toward the states that have a medical marijuana program. They wouldn't go after marijuana industry. And I don't know, John, can you elaborate on that if you can?
Sure.
That'd be great. Go ahead and explain that, because I think that is one thing that has helped the industry in other states, is that federal act.
Sure. So if you don't know who I am, my name is John Payne. I was the the campaign manager for New Approach Missouri, which passed Amendment 2. And so the Rural Rock Farm Amendment, which I believe is now the Blumenauer Farm Amendment, it's been attached to every major appropriations bill that's gone through Congress for the last, I think, 4+ years now. And essentially, yeah, what it says is that no money will be allocated to the DEA or federal prosecutors to go after someone who is growing, using, dispensing marijuana in compliance with their state laws. That's an important provision. If you're doing it and you're going outside the state laws, then you're still subject to that federal prosecution. Now, it's not an actual change in statute, but it is something that essentially means that the federal government doesn't have the power to prosecute you as long as you're complying with the state laws. But it does have to be renewed every time that every time that we have a near shutdown, that has to be renewed to keep that going. So.
Very good, thank you, John. Great job explaining. So, I think in our discussions with the Federal Reserve, and they're all looking at this a little differently than they did, say, 5 or 6 years ago, is the bottom line. And as most of you know, we're the 33rd state, and it's moving pretty fast. So speculation is the federal government will be looking even closer at doing something federally with the whole marijuana industry, just like they did the hemp industry with this year's farm bill, actually. So, or last year's farm bill. So that's kind of where we're heading with that. Yes, sir.
Have you determined the board makeup, or how you're going to determine that to govern everything? Are you putting a board together of the owners or the people in the industry moving forward?
No, that's not called for the amendment. It's strictly under the guidance of the Department of Health, I guess, to answer your question. Yes, sir.
Do you anticipate it being completely paperless, or as far as the applications and all that?
We intend to go electronic. It seems like that's the way of the future, and it's the easiest way to do it. There may be a paper backup system or something in case of failure or whatever, but yes, we intend for it to be electronic.
Have you thought about page limits on the application?
We really haven't talked about limits yet. We recognize that, it's going to be lengthy, but we certainly also recognize it should be as concise as possible. So we certainly understand that. The 10 categories were in the amendment that are to be used for the scoring. I'm sure many of you are aware of that. They're spelled out, and so we have to follow those categories.
What's the process of picking applicants?
The guidance is in those 10 categories. It talks about, business plan, security plan. It even gets into things like the character of the
Top page.
Mm-hmm.
It's the top page.
Top page, yeah. There we go. The 10 categories, basically, the character, veracity, background, qualifications, and relevant experience of the principal officers or managers. That's the first category. The second one, the business plan proposed by the applicant, which in the case of the cultivation facilities and dispensaries shall include the ability to maintain an adequate supply of marijuana, plans to ensure safety and security of qualifying patients and the community, procedures to be used to prevent diversion, and any plan for making marijuana available to low-income qualifying patients. So that piece that was brought up is part of that plan. But that's by the applicant, not by the state. The site security is a category all by itself. Experience in a legal cannabis market is a category. And again, these rules or these categories were all in the amendment, voted on by the voters, not by us. But we're the ones that have to implement them. In the case of medical marijuana testing facilities, the experience of their personnel with testing marijuana, food or drugs for toxin, and or the potency and healthcare industry experience. The next category is the potential for positive economic impact in the site community. In the case of medical marijuana cultivation facilities, the capacity or experience with agriculture, horticulture, and healthcare. In the case of medical marijuana dispensary facilities, the capacity or experience with healthcare, the suitability of the proposed location, and its accessibility for patients. In the case of medical marijuana infused products manufacturing facilities, the capacity or experience with food and beverage manufacturing, and maintaining competitiveness in the marijuana for medical use marketplace. So there's 10 categories. And then it says that in ranking the applicants and awarding licenses and certificates, the department may consult or contract with other public agencies with relevant expertise regarding these factors. And the department shall lift or ease any limit on the number of licenses or certificate holders in order to meet the demand for marijuana for medical use by qualifying patients. So what that says is even though we have the minimums, we would have the authority to increase that 192 if we deemed the 192 was not meeting the supply and the demand. So, yes, sir.
Forgot to actually give you this on my first time up, but Andy DiCarlo of Chesterfield, Missouri, we're applying for dispensary license. In fact, our whole team is made up of medical professionals here locally, so I think that's a good fit. One point is trying to find experienced help to run these facilities when they have to be with, living in Missouri within a year's time. It's really tough to find, experienced folks in town here. So within the application, it makes it really hard to satisfy that criteria to be able to find, hey, I got a dispensary manager that's, been doing this for years. It's real tough to find good help. It's one young lady had mentioned it earlier about experienced help and educating them, and I think that might be part of that plan that's in there, having some sort of education. But I'm going to hand you this, but if you could, I was curious about this software that somebody had mentioned earlier that's going to do tracking, and who's required to pay for that, and how all that gets installed.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
The answer is one, pay for the software.
Yeah.
The answer is the licensee will have to pay for the software. So, once those are selected, they have to pay for that part of the business expense.
Of course, we'll have a major portion of expense on the hub and the system in general, but you will be responsible for your seed to sale or point of sale system that ties in with ours, would be the answer there.
Has
Yes,
that
sir.
bid been let out yet?
What's that?
Has that bid been let out?
No, we are still working on the RFP. It's a pretty lengthy process working with state government on things like that. And we got to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, as I'm sure you can guess. And of course, our Office of Administration, OA, they deal with this all the time in state government. And so we're following their guidance, and we've got a lot of experts helping us on that, fortunately.
Yeah, and I'll just, in a situation like this, what we found this another program doing $1 billion home community-based service that we're doing out of our department, is that what people want is to be treated fairly. And so when you're applying for things, and not everybody may get what they want, people can understand that, but they want to be treated fairly. We think part of being treated fairly is to be as transparent as we possibly can. So everything within the law is sunshine. You can see it. We had 30,000 emails. Those are sunshine. All the things you just handed me, all those are sunshine. Anybody can see them, and we want people to see those. So it's clearly our goal to the degree that we legally can, according to the Constitution, to share with people any information that we're dealing with. Now, some things are protected. That's just the nature of the business. But if it's not, if it's possible, we want people to understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. So with that, I always, in any gathering, always get my cell phone. I only have one phone. Lyndall's smarter than me. He's been in politics. So but my number is, if you want to take it down, and I've had 2 phone calls driving here tonight. Jeff City about medical marijuana. It's 919-413-7791. Now, most of y'all aren't writing that down. I always tell my wife that, because I give this to every group I speak to. And I always tell her that proves one of two things. Either Missourians have really good memories, or I'm not nearly as important as I think I am. And trust me, my wife has a strong opinion on which of those she thinks it is.
Can you say that again, sir? What was your number?
919-413-7791. Now, there's a good chance that Lyndall's the guy you don't want to talk to. He's going to know more about that. But at any point in this process, if it's not going the way you think it should, or you have a concern or complaint, as director of the cabinet, it's my job to be accessible to answer that. So you're always welcome to call me if you have a concern.
Well, since you gave them yours, I'll have to give them my cell. But you are right, I do have another cell phone, and that's the one my sons call me on for money usually. Something. Okay, so my number is 573-751-6234. And that'll ring into my office, which Cheryl, if she's there, will a lot of times answer it, or I'll answer it. But again, feel free, we'll try to answer your questions we can. But we also ask that you do use our website if you can, because that does make it easier to get your question on paper where we can answer it, research it, whatever. And medical marijuana info at health.mo.gov is the email that we ask that you use. We really appreciate you coming out tonight. I know the weather has not been that great today, but fortunately it's better now than it was this morning. It means so much to have input from the citizens. And believe me, we do listen and we do jot down the notes, but we might not get our notes just right. I never learned shorthand in school. And so I may not get all the information. So if you could follow up with either sending your concerns in to the email, or if you simply write those down on the form we gave you, that's great. We will definitely take them back to the rulemakers, and it's amazing how many things we've already included in just the short time we've had some meetings. I worked for Walmart 17 years, and one thing in the days when Mr. Walton was still alive, one of the things he always told us was the best ideas come from your associates, especially those at the starting level. And so I've always remembered that, and I believe that's true in any business. Listen to your people. So. Thank you again for coming out. Have a safe trip home.